Thank you for joining us again on another episode of the Command Journey podcast. I am your host, Michael Diamond, and we are back with another episode. And in true Command Journey fashion, we like to let the guests introduce themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the guest, please tell us who we have with us.
Hi, my name is Matt Kambic. Been with Command 16 years now. It's been quite a journey, great experience. I came in my previous employer from a software validation company and an IP background in telecommunications, which as the industry progresses and as our technology progresses, I rely on more and more heavily as the technology is an ever-evolving IP-enabled world that we live in.
So today, we want to thank you for joining us, of course. And then our topic today is going to be specifically towards system migration. So there's an awful lot happening in the industry every day, but one of the longer arcs that's going on now is a change from older technology to newer technology. And some of the customer sites that you and I have interacted with over the months and years likely are running on hardware that's been around for some period of time. And so we're going to talk about migration. And I think what I'd like to ask you off the bat is, what would you define? What is a migration from a customer's standpoint?
Sure, great question. A migration is typically when a customer invests in a solution, and then after some years, after the technology ages, it evolves, it changes, the industry needs change, the customers' needs change. For example, with COVID, a lot of people started working remotely, and suddenly that created a shift in a lot of the use cases of a lot of our devices and products. So the migration is usually just a fulfillment of the needs change, where they used to have equipment that was maybe purely closed circuit, and now they want to open it up to integrate it with new systems or with the network, and then the network requirements that go on top of that, the encryption and the security. So it's usually just a modernization of that equipment, and sometimes with a new vision in mind.
Okay. So what I like to do is, from a customer standpoint, think about what the warning signs are. So a customer may have a intercom, several different intercoms, an entire system, whether it be a building, single, or perhaps a campus or a larger facility. What are some of those warning signs when we look at the topology of a system, or the day-to-day device interaction that a customer would see and say, what's the age that they might question? No, this intercom has worked faithfully for 10 or 15 years. What are the signs that they're going to need to look towards that migration?
Yeah, definitely. Factors that they would have to consider would, our system lasts a very long time, a high mean time between failure. But at the end of the day, everything with an on-off switch has a life. Nothing lasts forever. And it's an interesting point with Commend when you consider the things that you have in your daily experience that have on-off switches, and how many of those have been in continuous use and in operation. And then you think of the age of those. How many devices have you interacted with recently that are over 15 years old with an on-off switch? It would be a very short list, probably a lamp or two, but not your TV, not your phone, not your computer, probably not your refrigerator anymore. These devices have much shorter lifespans. So even though the Commend equipment has a commitment to quality and has a very long life, they're at the end of the day resistors and capacitors and devices that will eventually start to show their age. And a modernization of that hardware is a good idea, but also the new security that can be on top of that. So 15 years ago, it may have been enough to assume that it was a closed network and no one would ever tap into it. But today, with a zero trust model, that's usually not sufficient enough for the security imposed. So what additional encryption can it provide, or what additional authentication can it provide? And then the change of I want to record this audio now, and how is that going to be possible? So I'd say an analysis of the age and the expected age would be a good predictor of how long it should last, but also of maybe a 5-year forecast to see what we anticipate doing in the next 5 years, and looking at the latest best practices and market trends.
Yeah, market trends are definitely something that we take a good long look at, and we have been highlighting for most of the year a focus on cybersecurity and cyber awareness. And so I wonder, as customers begin to look towards new features and new advantages to some of the current hardware that Commend offers, I wonder, is there something in the overall topology or system architecture that they need to pay attention to when it comes to those choices?
Yeah, the command system is it's usually not an island. At least in the recent trends, it's heavily integrated, especially with SIP, into their existing solutions. Those solutions could include Cisco and third-party access control systems. They could integrate into telephony and VoIP systems. They could integrate into building management and BMS. And um, definitely, when you do a migration, sometimes it's good to zoom out for a moment and take a look at the big picture, because there are sometimes new integrations that didn't exist, or sometimes new ways to pivot the existing solution to better fulfill what you're looking for.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there are some clear advantages with the newer hardware that's offered. If you had just a moment to think about what are some of the clearer advantages of the newest hardware, what would they be?
The first thing that comes to mind for sure, right off the top of my head, is the digital signage. So, with a history of Commend, a lot of our devices in the past only had a button, a speaker, and a mic. And now today, it's very typical that they come with an LCD lit display with the capability, rather, of full video graphics, which gives pretty much a permanent signage at that location or conditional station to display additional information, maybe advertisements, and that can be monetized, maybe advanced notifications, or assisting those with audio impairment. And that way, if there's some kind of a mass notification, it's not just audibly spoken. The screens can provide that digital signage, and it can be respective to the location where the device is located. So, individually tailored to each location and its adapted needs. And that just really gives us something we never had before, another layer on top of what we had before, but really an additional enhancement that I think is really brings more benefit to the overall solution.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that is easiest to overlook when you're thinking about whether it be an emergency messaging system or whether it be just a general PA that's going to make announcements, one of the things people they might fail to think of is what could be useful to be seen in an area.
Hmm.
So whether it's something like an IM3 or an IM6 that from Commend that could also work with televisions that are up in an area, or like you said, digital signage. Well, there's a huge advantage there to be able to press that message out.
Yeah, definitely.
So, a lot of the customers that are going through migrations now are dealing with older hardware. These could be GE series servers, maybe a 200 or a 700 series. What are some best practices when we approach that type of hardware for our customers to look at?
Definitely a good documentation of its use case. So sometimes we are provided configuration files, which is a good snapshot of what is configured, but it doesn't give us the full picture of how they use it. So, for example, a station could have a keypad, and there might not be programming specifically to create shortcut codes, but maybe there's a piece of paper next to the intercom that says dial 123, and that's what the operator is normally used to dialing. It wouldn't show up in the programming that they're consistently dialing 123. There's, of course, the list of valid numbers to dial, but the use case really gives a functionality overview of, oh, so what is the goal of 123? The goal is really to connect to a device. Maybe they're not even aware that shortcuts are possible, and with the screens now it can be a button, and the button can be configurable with graphics and with colors, and just making their overall life and usage of the system easier. So I'd say, first of all, a good overview of really how they anticipate using the system or how they have in the past. And then with those older servers, it's good to just to document what is there. Sometimes, due to the age of that hardware, it's been in service for so many years. People just forget that they even have it. It's just continued to work without issues. And sometimes we have techs that call in on the phone, and they don't even know they had a server because they've never had to service it or maintain it. So that's not the story for everyone, but by and large, it's equipment that really lasts a very long time with very little minimal and maintenance needed for it. So sometimes when the new integrator takes over, it's a game of just figuring out and documenting where things are and what they have. And sometimes those bits and pieces can connect to external systems, and then the rabbit trail gets a little deeper to figure out, well, what is this really connected to? Oh, it's a telephone line. What does it connect to? Oh, it rings to a cell phone. Now, oh, so the goal is to ring a cell phone. Oh, we have new options as well. More suited for the smartphones of today. That wasn't a solution possibility some years ago.
Yeah, no, there's an awful lot to think about. I know that a lot of times too, customers have, maybe they're not directly interacting with those servers or haven't been in some time because they've been so rock solid. And the nice part about what Commend can do is we can assist them with getting at the details of what goes on to help piece that puzzle together.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look, say, 5 years down the road, if you look, given your breadth and your experience in the industry, where do you think the focus is in the next 5 years? What is the next thing that we move into?
Well, historically, of course, there's always been in most locations two networks, two main communication distribution methods, and that was a voice network and a data network. And the industry has been seeing a merge and convergence of those two. So you used to have phone lines, and next to it was your data lines. Well, now you just have one line, and all your voice and your data are on top of it. And then the next, as I see it, the next evolution of that was, now that they're merged, now there's a consolidation of the management, and IT is suddenly having to deal more and more with configuring of voice devices and security devices, and having to get into this new space for them that they're not as familiar with. And then on the other side of that, the techs, who are usually just focused on one brand or one device or one way of doing it, suddenly now they're having to have dialogues with IT and talk about VLANs and a whole bunch of stuff that are not as familiar to them. And I think that's where we are today. And moving forward, I think it's just going to continue, where we have the introduction of AI, which is, of course, a buzzword, but it represents a new way of looking at solutions and a new way of building tools. And there's a variety of ways to implement those, but by and large, it's the automation that the AI provides to take the tasks that used to be done with a handsaw and now can be done with a power tool. And just like when many years ago, when power tools came out, there was some kickback by carpenters, and we would never use these tools. They're dangerous, and they require additional energy supplies and electricity connection and such. And now today, I don't know of many carpenters that don't use such tools because they're a time saver, and we've learned the ins and outs of those. And I think the Ivy connection we have is a great first step in that area, where the Ivy is a chat bot, an AI of sorts that is that first point of contact, which the customers already started to build a relationship with, talking to Siri and Alexa and many of the other ones. They're starting to get familiar with, and the generational change from the new generation coming in that was grown up on an iPhone. These kids, since 2 years old, have had that access to technology, and I just think it's going to continue where the AI is able to do some of the configuration for you, where like a chat GPT, you literally just tell it, I have 3 devices and they should ring to one device, and the AI starts to set up that kind of thing. And we have already started to move a little bit in that direction to centralize our configuration in the cloud, so that someone in the future would be able, from a cloud portal, to be able to configure even their on-premise equipment. And then it's a next logical step to start to bolt on AI and big data and analytics and all the things that can be done with that, where today it's more or less a manual process.
I think it's an interesting point that we're at in the industry. We get to see the birth of the next generation of machine learning. And while certainly there are some safeguards that are important to keep in place, there are advantages to those tools being in our hands.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A great point. Okay, Matthew, I appreciate you coming on the Commend Journey podcast. I'm certain that some of our listeners have probably talked to you via tech support. So I hope it was a great treat for the audience and everyone else. And I want to thank you for your time.
Thanks. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.